Welcome to Auto News Talk. If you just glance at the broader macroeconomic headlines right now, you would logically think the global auto industry is completely on fire.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it looks like a total disaster from the outside.
Right. You see these endless reports of severe geopolitical chaos, completely choked supply chains, and just massive spikes in raw material costs. It looks like a perfect storm designed to sink profitability.
It really does. But, if you look past those headlines and actually examine the balance sheets and the operational strategies of these automakers and dealers, you find this really fascinating kind of counterintuitive reality.
Which is that they aren't panicking.
Not at all. Instead, they are quietly engineering this incredible, almost invisible profit shield. They're finding highly savvy ways to keep operations running smoothly and keep their margins intact.
It's a phenomenal lesson in forced adaptation, right?
Yeah.
Because I like to think of the current auto industry like a ship sailing through a massive storm.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, like the waves outside are violent and unpredictable, but inside, the crew is ruthlessly optimizing every single moving part just to keep the cargo safe.
Exactly. Because when an industry can't control global shipping lanes and it can't dictate international trade tariffs, it has to look inward. The strategy becomes entirely about margin protection.
Just squeezing efficiency out of everything else.
Yeah, exactly. Squeezing efficiency out of everything within their grasp. We're talking about optimizing every single touch point. So from the way a massive freight carrier tracks a delivery on a rural highway, all the way down to how an online car buyer clicks a search filter on a website.
Every ounce of friction removed is basically a fraction of a percent added to the bottom line.
That is exactly the terrain we are walking through. It's a story about margin protection.
So we are going to map out exactly how this profit shield is being constructed. And to understand this survival strategy, we have to look at it in layers.
Right, starting at the macro level.
Yes. First, we'll examine how the giant manufacturers are physically absorbing these global shocks. Then we'll move down to see how middlemen are digitizing the logistics. And finally, look at the ground game of protecting the physical dealerships and capturing you, the consumer.
And you really have to start with the biggest players to understand the sheer scale of the headwinds.
So let's look at the operational data coming out of General Motors. Because one report specifically looking at General Motors highlights how geopolitical conflicts, specifically the ongoing tensions involving Iran, is directly driving up energy and logistics costs.
Yeah, that analysis is staggering. They are projecting a $1.5 billion to $2 billion increase in commodity and freight expenses for GM.
$2 billion. That is an enormous financial hurdle to clear just to maintain the status quo.
It really is. And, when conflicts arise in vital maritime choke points, ships have to reroute.
Right, which means burning more fuel.
Burning more fuel, paying higher insurance premiums, and just extending the timeline of every single delivery.
And to manage that specific risk, the report notes GM is making these massive pivots. They are actively diverting shipments of their really profitable full-size pickups away from the Middle East and funneling them straight back into the U.S. market.
Because that pivot is all about defending their most valuable territory. They are heavily leaning on their premium consumers to act as a buffer.
And there's a really memorable detail in that report about the average transaction price, or ATP. It's sitting at roughly $52,000.
Which is well above the industry average.
Exactly. So as long as domestic consumers show zero signs of abandoning those premium, fully loaded trims, despite all the macro uncertainty, GM can effectively digest those inflated freight bills.
Yeah, they use absolute operational discipline to offset global instability. But there's a really interesting nuance in that same cost data regarding chips.
Oh, right, the automotive DRAM chips.
Yeah, the memory chips you need for modern vehicle infotainment and processing. The data shows they are seeing massive price hikes, but, and this is key, the report clarifies that this specific inflation has nothing to do with the war.
Wait, really? What's driving it then?
It's actually being driven by AI data center demand.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, AI is just swallowing up the global silicon supply, so it's a completely different kind of supply chain chokehold compounding the mess.
That's wild. But I do have to push back a little on the precision of this report.
Okay, how so?
Well, what it doesn't quantify is the exact dollar impact of the energy and logistics increase, specifically isolated to the conflict. It hands us that broad $1.5 to $2 billion figure, but it leaves open exactly how much is driven by the maritime rerouting versus just standard baseline inflation.
That's a very fair point. The lines are blurry. And honestly, the lines get even blurrier when you look at another analysis of GM's financial outlook.
Which adds a really fascinating wrinkle to this whole narrative.
It does, because this outlook shows their strong high-margin sales are being paired with this massive, unexpected regulatory windfall.
Yeah, the numbers here are crazy. Profits surged 22%, driven by resilient U.S. demand for trucks and SUVs, which, by the way, defies the usual trend where high gas prices kill large vehicle sales.
Right. Usually that's a death sentence for trucks.
Exactly. And GM even raised their profit outlook by $500 million. But the piece explicitly notes that this raise roughly mirrors an anticipated one-time refund following a U.S. Supreme Court ruling.
A ruling that struck down Trump-era tariffs.
Yes. So wait, I have to ask. Are they succeeding because they are selling great $52,000 trucks? Or because they just got a lucky break from the Supreme Court?
That is the ultimate question, right? And the reporting actually underscores this massive policy risk. It points out that foreign automakers reportedly threatened to pull economy models from the U.S. entirely if a new trade deal with Mexico and Canada wasn't reached.
Which would create a huge vacuum at the bottom of the market.
Exactly. But to answer your question, that's the main limitation of this financial reporting. It leaves it totally unclear what the actual mechanics and timeline are for that tariff refund.
So we don't know how much of that $500 million raise is pure operational strength versus just a one-time legal payout.
Right, exactly. We just don't know the split.
Well, regardless, at the corporate level, they are fiercely protecting those margins.
Yep.
But to transition here, it's one thing to protect a margin on a corporate spreadsheet. The actual physical vehicles, those $52,000 assets, are sitting out the open on dealership lots.
Getting more valuable by the day.
Exactly. And that brings us to the ground game, because the exact same geopolitical strains driving up costs for manufacturers are making the cars on local lots highly attractive targets for theft.
Right. And an industry column by the CEO of ProVigil really zeroes in on this ground-level reality. The central insight here is that postponing physical security upgrades is no longer fiscal discipline.
It's a compounding risk.
Exactly. It's a compounding risk because of those rising vehicle values.
And the author connects this directly back to what we were just talking about. The conflict around the Strait of Hormuz is pressuring transport, which is lifting the prices of raw metals like aluminum.
Which means the parts themselves are just skyrocketing in value.
Yeah. And the article notes the average new vehicle price is sitting at $49,275. So every single loss is devastating.
And that's why the author advocates for what they call a layered deterrence-first approach. Because you can't just throw up 20-foot fences around a dealership.
No, that totally ruins the open lot retail experience. Nobody wants to shop for a car in a prison yard.
Right. So the article champions this technology called remote video monitoring, or RVM, and it combines that with AI to analyze suspicious behavior in real time.
Intervening before the theft happens.
Exactly. Instead of just recording a video for the police to look at the next morning, the AI triggers audible deterrents like loud alarms or strobe lights the second someone acts suspiciously.
But wait, is this turning dealerships into open-air casinos?
What do you mean?
Like, you have all these cameras in the sky analyzing your behavior with AI, and you don't even realize you're being watched until you do something wrong and a loudspeaker starts yelling at you.
I mean, it sounds intense, but dealers are facing these brutal, silent costs of theft.
Silent costs.
Yeah, it's not just the lost truck. It's the staff hours wasted on investigations. It's dealing with angry customers whose reserved cars got stripped. And it's the massive spikes in insurance premiums. In this high-cost environment, a single unmitigated loss can wipe out an entire quarter's profit margin for a small dealer.
Wow. Okay, when you put it like that, the AI cameras make a lot more sense. But what this piece doesn't give dealers is a precise way to perfectly model the return on investment.
Yeah, that's the big open question here.
Right, it outlines the theory beautifully, but the total cost of ownership for these high-tech AI systems, that's left pretty vague.
It is. But moving these high-value vehicles securely and efficiently is paramount. And that brings us to the middlemen.
The logistics providers.
Right. They are finally bringing the carrier workflow out of the paper age and fully onto the smartphone.
Which is crazy that it took this long. Looking at the logistics side, Cox Automotive details how their central dispatch app is evolving.
Yeah, the core insight from Cox is that carrier apps are evolving from these simple inspection tools into end-to-end mobile workspaces.
The goal being to keep freight moving without administrative lag.
Exactly.
Sorry.
Because historically, freight is a nightmare of paperwork. But the Central Dispatch app added these in-app electronic bills of lading, or e-bills.
Which completely replaces the paper clipboard.
Yes. And carriers can now add incidental charges, like surprise tolls or unexpected storage fees right there in the app. They add supporting details instantly to prevent disputes with the dealer later.
And there's this one feature that just blew my mind. Completing an inspection in the app automatically turns on real-time tracking.
Which is huge.
It is. It cuts down on those endless, where's my car phone calls. But I just marvel at the archaic nature of freight. Like, why did it take the industry this long to realize truck drivers don't carry desktop computers in their cabs?
I know, it's wild, but the adoption is real. The app boasts over 141,000 downloads, and it's facilitated more than 4.7 million mobile inspections.
That is a massive digital shift for these drivers.
And it directly protects those tight margins we discussed in Chapter 1. Efficiency in transit means cars arrive faster and dealers get paid sooner.
But there is a limitation in this Cox announcement. They say these features are active, but what the source leaves open is the detailed rollout schedule across their entire network.
Right, like how long until every single independent carrier is actually using this?
Exactly. We don't know.
Yeah.
But just as logistics are consolidating onto a single screen for drivers, retail platforms are doing the exact same thing for consumers.
Yeah, the digital consolidation for the buyer.
Right. And to see how this hits the consumer, we look at a strategic move by Kazoo. They are actively absorbing the Motors brand in a massive dealer marketplace consolidation.
And the central insight there is all about eliminating duplicate engineering work and concentrating marketing power.
Because running two competing digital marketplaces is incredibly inefficient. So the Motors consumer website is being phased out, and its ad business is rebranding under the Kazoo name.
The strategy is to basically back a single, stronger brand to challenge the market leaders. They want to avoid what they call audience leakage.
Which is when you have staged traffic routing and you basically end up bidding against yourself for the same customer's attention.
Exactly. And Kazoo is leveraging its massive 60% consumer brand awareness to justify swallowing the Motors brand whole.
They're like two restaurants merging their kitchens, right?
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
Yeah, the menu changes out front for the customers, but the chefs in the back, the dealers, they don't have to learn a new way to cook. The piece notes that crucial dealer operations like inventory feeds and stock management remain completely unchanged during the migration.
Right, and by stopping two internal teams from building the exact same features, they accelerate innovation and hopefully deliver higher quality leads to those dealers.
But the big unknown here, the limitation of this strategy, is what happens to the B2B side.
Yeah, pricing is a huge question.
Pricing, dealer contracts, and whether the Motors name even survives in any back-end capacity going forward, it's all up in the air.
It is. So let's take a step back and really synthesize this entire journey we just went on.
Yeah, pull it all together for us.
If you look across all of this, three clear themes emerge. First, geopolitical vulnerability. Global conflicts like the situation in Iran and the Strait of Hormuz, they are dictating local realities.
Right. It's driving up freight costs for GM. And at the exact same time, it's increasing theft risk for local dealers, as we saw in the provincial security piece.
Exactly. The second theme is this relentless drive for workflow consolidation. Whether it's Cox putting entire freight operations onto a smartphone or Kazoo merging two retail platforms into one, the mandate is clear.
Eliminate friction and redundancy.
Spot on. And the third theme is leaning on premium assets. Margins are being defended by the sheer value of the vehicles themselves. We saw that with the GM sources highlighting the high-end trucks and the ProVigil source noting how the near $50,000 sticker price makes physical security an absolute necessity.
But there are also some massive tensions here, right? Like, the contradictions are almost as interesting as the themes.
Oh, definitely. The fuel paradox is a big one.
Yeah, because one GM source highlights that high gas prices are historically terrible for large vehicle sales, yet right now, those trucks are lifting profits.
But simultaneously, that same analysis notes oil prices are causing a massive surge in EV purchases globally. So the consumer is essentially splitting in two opposite directions.
It's wild. And the other tension is this dynamic between high-end domestic vehicles and economy foreign models. The GM cost source shows domestic automakers relying on $52,000 premium trims. But the GM Outlook source points out foreign automakers are threatening to pull economy models over trade disputes.
Which creates a potential vacuum at the absolute bottom of the market.
Exactly. So what is the practical takeaway from all this? What is the so what for you listening?
The so what is that efficiency and security are no longer just nice to haves. Whether you are an OEM, a carrier, or a local dealer, proactively upgrading your digital and physical infrastructure is literally the only way to survive the silent costs of a volatile world.
Because efficiency isn't just about saving a few bucks on administration anymore, right? In today's auto industry, efficiency is armor.
It really is. It's the only shield they have.
Well, thank you so much for joining us and exploring all of this on Auto News Talk. As a next step for you, the audience, keep a close eye on the sticker prices on your local lots.
Yeah, definitely watch those numbers.
Because, as all these behind-the-scenes costs, the global shipping reroutes, the AI security cameras, the digital upgrades, as they all compound, watch to see how much of that check you, the consumer, are ultimately forced to pick up. Thanks again for tuning in to Auto News Talk.